This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman with Juan Gonzalez. Juan?
Well, a federal judge has ordered the release of another prisoner held at Guantanamo Bay, 30-year-old Syrian national Abdul Rahim Abdul Razak al-Janko. In the year 2000, al-Janko was tortured by al-Qaeda, who accused him of being a Western spy, and he was imprisoned by the Taliban for 18 months. He was then captured by the United States in 2002 and spent the next 7 years in Guantanamo. On Monday, District Court Judge Richard Leon rejected the government's position that al-Janko had once been a part of al-Qaeda, saying it, quote, defies common sense. Al-Janko's lawyers say it is unlikely he will be sent back to his native Syria, and the judge ordered the Obama administration to find a country that would accept him. Now the idea that Guantanamo detainees found to be innocent might be resettled here in the United States created a political uproar. The nearly $106 billion war funding bill that passed in the Senate last week includes a stipulation that prohibits detainees from being released in the United States and allows the transfer of detainees for prosecution only after Congress receives a plan detailing the risks.
Well, after 100 countries refused, Bermuda and the Pacific island nation of Palau have both accepted a group of Uyghur prisoners who'd been held at Guantanamo for 7 years, even though U.S. officials admitted they were wrongly detained. This weekend, while the Bermudan Prime Minister survived a no-confidence vote over secretly agreeing to accept some of the prisoners, President Obama made light of the situation of the Uyghurs at a speech at the Radio-Television Correspondents' Dinner.
Nick at Night has a new take on an old classic. Leave it to Uyghurs.
President Obama also joked about the refusal of other countries to resettle prisoners at Guantanamo.
As I traveled to all these countries, I saw firsthand how much people truly have in common with one another. Because no matter where I went, there's one thing I heard over and over again from every world leader. No thanks, but have you considered Palau?
The Obama administration has said that some of those detainees who are not immediately cleared for release could face trial in the United States. At a Senate Judiciary Committee hearing last week, Attorney General Eric Holder told Republican Senator Lindsey Graham that he expects no more than a quarter of the remaining 229 prisoners would stand trial.
The 250 people we have at Guantanamo Bay, what percentage do you think at the end of the day will go through a military commission Article 3 court?
It's hard to say at this point. I'm not sure the trends have necessarily developed. We've gone through about half of the detainees at this point. I don't think we're going to have a very huge number.
Yeah, would you say less than 25%? 25% or less?
That might be about right.
Yeah.
The Attorney General was also questioned about the administration's proposal to indefinitely hold some detainees at Guantanamo without charges, those neither cleared for release nor trial. This is Democratic Senator Herb Kohl of Wisconsin.
So there are some who might be retained indefinitely without due process?
No, with due process consistent with the laws of war. The due process that I would focus on would be in the initial determination. Due process would be afforded them with regard to making the decision that they would be placed into that detention mode, and then a periodic review that would be done. We would want to work with members of this committee and with Congress to come up with the exact parameters of that due process, but we'd only want to do that in conjunction with Congress and with the assurance that what we're doing is consistent with our values and with our commitment to due process.
Our next guest has followed the stories of almost all the nearly 800 prisoners held at Guantanamo. British journalist and historian Andy Worthington is the author of the Guantanamo Files, the stories of the 774 detainees in America's illegal prison. His writings on Guantanamo have appeared in a number of publications. He maintains a widely read blog at andyworthington.co.uk. He joins us now from London. Welcome to Democracy Now! Let's start with with President Obama's joke at the radio-television dinner, talking to journalists, joking about the Uyghurs. Tell us who they are, Andy.
The Uyghurs are, well, there were 22 Chinese men who were picked up in Pakistan in the early days of Operation Enduring Freedom. And almost from the beginning, the military knew that they were not connected to terrorism, that they had no involvement with al-Qaeda and the Taliban. And it appears that they were regarded as important because they were able to provide intelligence on what was happening in their part of China, up in the northwest of China. They were eventually cleared for release. The Bush administration actually admitted that they weren't enemy combatants. And last October, a judge ordered that because no other country had been found that would take them, because they can't be returned to China, because it was unconstitutional to hold them at Guantanamo, they must be released into the United States. And the government appealed, and the Obama administration, has maintained that same position, and has backed up the appeals court, which ruled that a court has no right to order anyone from Guantanamo to be released into the United States.
And Andy Worthington, why would so many countries around the world refuse to take them?
Well, most countries around the world don't want to upset China. There were 5 Uyghurs who were previously released in 2006, and the only country in the world that was prepared to accept them was Albania. And I think after that, the Albanians had so much pressure put on them by the Chinese government that it kind of put everybody else off.
Let's go to this story breaking today. The federal judge ordering the release of yet another prisoner at Guantanamo, the 30-year-old Syrian national named Abdul Rahim Abdul Razak al-Janko, tortured by al-Qaeda in 2000, who accused him of being a Western spy, held by the Taliban for a year and a half, then held for years, for what, 7 years at Guantanamo, and the video that's just been released. Explain this story.
Well, it is the most extraordinary story, I think. And, you know, I've been following extraordinary stories of incompetence and wrongly imprisoned men for over 3 years now. But he was one of 5 men who were held in a Taliban jail. There were, I think, at least another 3 who were seized on other circumstances from Taliban jails, and yet were sent to Guantanamo. And all these other men have now gone home. Now, a British journalist met him when he'd been abandoned in this Taliban jail and came across his whole story about how he'd been accused of being a spy, tortured by al-Qaeda. And the extraordinary thing about this video is that initially the administration thought that it showed him being a potential suicide bomber. This is actually the false confession that he made as a result of being tortured by al-Qaeda. I understand that the Bush administration would pursue this case because they didn't really want to admit that they captured people by mistake, sent them to Guantanamo when they shouldn't have been sent there. For the Obama administration to have come in, for the Justice Department to have looked at this case, to have decided that it was worth taking in front of a habeas judge and arguing that a man who was tortured and imprisoned for 18 months by the Taliban still had some connection with these people, even though he'd only ever been involved with them for about 3 weeks before they decided he was a spy. It just simply beggars belief, I think.
Well, the federal judge in the case, U.S. District Judge Richard Leon, said this is a tragedy. This is a nightmare for an innocent man being accused of all of these things. He said he is a brave person and wants to tell his story. Instead, he gets mistaken for being a terrorist. How soon do you think that the Obama administration now will be forced